Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I am, as Mark said, going to talk about what's new and what's coming up in HTCondor. So we are currently just in April. We started a new stable series, or what we're calling now the stable channel that only has bug fixes. We released HTCondor 9.0, and in fact, last week we released the first point release as well. After 9.0, we released 9.01. And we have our development series, or what we call now the current channel, has also, we started a new development series. So we released 9.10. And of course, the big news here is, we finally got HTCondor version 9.0 out the door. And this contains 71 documented enhancements that were introduced in the past 14 8.9 releases. And on the link on the slide there, you can see a detailed version history from the manual. But in order to enjoy the enhancements in HTCondor 9, you first have to install it. So installing HTCondor, especially on a cluster using multiple servers, was a bit daunting in the past. You had to do all the steps on the slide here, figure out precisely what distribution you're using, an operating system, add native packaging repositories and signing keys with system packaging commands like yum and apt, install the binaries, open the manual to page 970 or wherever, the big section on security, and learn how to make your cluster secure if you wanted something more secure than just host-based or IP address-based authentication. You got to configure all of your security, figure out how your system starts services, and finally start up HTCondor and set it up so it also gets started at reboot. Like I said, this process is a bit daunting for someone new to the HTCondor game. So one thing we did for 9.0 is we gave the documentation on getting and installing Condor some love. So the very first section in the manual is a new Getting HTCondor section, where we talk about getting HTCondor not only from native packaging, but also from Docker images, for instance, if you're using a Kubernetes cluster. And if you're setting up a Condor via native packaging on just one machine, it's literally one command that you can cut and paste. Or if you're building a cluster across multiple servers, you can cut and paste one command per role in your HTCondor pool. And an HTCondor pool always has a server acting as a central manager, a server, one or more servers acting as an access point or a submit node, and one or more servers acting as an execute point, or, as Marone said, where a start D runs. So because Greg Thane says I never learn, I'm actually going to attempt a live demo. And in this demo, I'm going to show with HTCondor 9 using a new tool that we call Get HTCondor. You can set up a distributed HTCondor cluster in less time than it takes Aaron Rodgers to score a touchdown against the hapless Chicago Bears. And if you've ever watched my beloved Packers play the Bears, you know that this can happen in just a couple minutes. So let's see if I can do this. So first step, yes, my laptop runs Windows. So first step is I'm going to set up 3 servers using Docker, 3 brand new Virgin CentOS 7 machines. So this machine is going to be called cm.toddT.org. This will serve as my central manager. And there it is. This machine here, I'll set up as an execute node, and we'll call it execute01.toddT. And I will set up an access point called access.toddT. All right, I got my 3 servers going. I'm going to start my stopwatch. And first thing, I'm going to install HTCondor on the central manager. I'm going to cut and paste the command out of the manual. And this is using get.htcondor.org and basically curling it, pulling this command off the web, piping it into bash. And on the command line here, I have to give a password. Any server that joins this pool needs to know the password, so you would keep it safe. And I say the role is central manager. So I hit enter there. I'm going to go to my execute machine, give the exact same command, except instead of telling get HTCondor, I want the central manager on this machine. I want a role of an execute machine, an execute point. And I will do the same on my access node. And instead of central manager, I'm going to say submit. So assuming my home broadband doesn't fall over dead, we'll let that keep going. And I'm sure as you're looking at this, some of you have probably have some questions. Like, I don't want to pipe something off the internet into a root shell on my production machines. I don't blame you. And the short answer is you don't have to. You might be wondering, well, the end result of this, is it a secure configuration? And the answer is yes. Authentication will happen via tokens, which we'll talk about. And there will be encryption of all network traffic. And you might be saying, well, this is great for making a new pool, but how do I update my existing pool? And for that, I would say tune in to Todd Miller's talk, which is going to happen Wednesday morning at, first talk of the day on Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. Chicago time. He will go into more detail about both this Get HTCondor tool I'm demoing, as well as upgrading your existing pool. So let's see how we're doing. A little bit slower than Aaron Rodgers can do in the Chicago Bears, probably due to my my internet. So maybe while this is continuing to go, we'll talk a bit about what's new in 9.0. So, Mark, can you still see my slides? Are they big enough?
They're still there, yeah.
Okay. So in HTCondor 9.0, there's a bunch of functionality, new functionality for end users. And by end users, I mean users that actually submit HTCondor jobs and HTCondor work. Users are able to transfer job data directly from web servers and Box.com and Amazon and Google. There's improved support for GPUs. There's improved Python bindings. Oh, it looks like my installation is done. So 3 minutes and 20 seconds to make a pool. If I go over here to my access point, I can run Condor status and see my pool. I can run Condor queue and see the pool. I could submit some jobs and watch it go. My pool is set up. So a lot of new functionality for end users that are submitting jobs, but I'm not going to go into detail here because this is the topic of Christina's talk this afternoon, right after our lunch break. There's also a lot of new functionality for sysadmins. And I mean, these are also users of HTCondor, but typically they're setting up an HTCondor pool for other users to use. A lot of new stuff, new features for sysadmins, a fundamental change to the security model, new packaging options, ability to push historical job information into Elasticsearch, which we're finding very useful here at CHTC, data flow mode for jobs, a bunch of nice stuff. Again, I'm not going to go into detail here because this is the topic of Greg's talk. So what I am going to talk about, it's what's coming to HTCondor in version 9.1, the new developer series and beyond. So what can you expect to see in the next 10 to 12 months? So we've put some work on this into the past, and we are continuing we're kind of getting back to it now. We want the ability to organize jobs into job sets. Right now, when you submit a group of jobs into HTCondor, they're submitted into what we call a job cluster. And you're able to remove all the jobs in a cluster, and you can edit all the jobs in the cluster. But there's some fundamental mechanisms we feel are missing from job clusters. And we want to fix that in our implementation of job sets. And this is the ability, for instance, to append jobs to an existing set in a subsequent submission, or perhaps move an entire set of jobs from one access point to another access point. Also, we're putting into job sets the notion of job set aggregates. So you submit a set of jobs, and the SCED would keep aggregate information on this full set, such as how many jobs succeeded, how many jobs failed, how many jobs had to be restarted, what's the total amount of CPU time used across all the jobs in the set. And we want job sets partially because users want to think about a set of jobs as it relates to their own mental model. For instance, a set of jobs analyzing genome 52, or a set of jobs doing image analysis on a specific images from a specific date. And users don't want to, base sets on when they actually ran Condor submit, which is currently all they get with clusters. We're experimenting with a new command line user interface. So the legacy tools we have now, like Condor Q and Condor Submit, they're not going anywhere. Don't worry, they're not disappearing or anything. But we're using this opportunity of introducing job sets to come up with a new user interface where you do Condor space noun space verb. So you could do Condor set submit or Condor set status. And likewise, if you're just submitting a job instead of a set of jobs, you could do Condor job submit, Condor job status. We are continuing to do work on the annex. So the HTCondor annex allows you to dynamically add execute slots into your HTCondor environment. And we're continuing to work on mechanisms to enable end users to provision an annex from a local cluster on their campus, like a Slurm HPC cluster, public cloud, or HPC centers, supercomputers at HPC centers if you have an allocation at such a HPC center. So tying back to job sets, we're working on the ability for a user to specify a set of jobs and then run it as a campaign at an HPC site. Now, some of these HPC sites have specific challenges, like it's fairly common for execute nodes at an HPC site to have no outgoing network connectivity. And so we did a bunch of work already to allow us to communicate with the HTCondor services on an execute node at an HPC site via a file system. And this approach has been successfully used by our friends in Europe at the Barcelona Supercomputing Center and PIC. And it's also been used here in the US at Fermi National Labs. We want to work on improving our GPU scheduling. So HTCondor has long been able to detect and schedule GPU jobs using CUDA or OpenSIL. More recently, HTCondor is able to monitor and report both job GPU and processor utilization and GPU memory utilization back into the job ad. And currently in the works is the ability to run concurrent jobs on one GPU device, because we have a lot of collaborators are finding that GPU devices have capacity left over if they're just running one job. So why not pack in more jobs? But we have questions about how to do this. Should we ask users to specify the GPU memory required by their job for scheduling purposes? Should we limit the jobs that we run as on the same GPU device to be from the same from the same user, or perhaps from the same job set? How should we best use MIG devices? We have ideas on all this, but we want to hear from you. And utilizing multiple jobs on one GPU device is a topic of a town hall discussion on Wednesday afternoon. And we, if you're interested in running GPU jobs, we please ask that you join us. We support containers through Docker Universe and Singularity support, but we want to move away from Docker jobs or Singularity jobs to just container jobs. So users don't care if we use Docker or Singularity or something else to run their container. They just want to specify that they have a container. So we're looking at doing that and also supporting Podman, and also the ability to support private images from, say, a Docker Hub compliant repository, and keeping those images private by caching them locally, but not reusing any cached copies if they're a private image across different users. We're continuing to work on integration with Kubernetes. And this next year, we plan to introduce the ability in the HTCondor CE, the ability to provision resources from a Kubernetes cluster, and also support an easy one command installation of an HTCondor pool into a Kubernetes cluster. We are doing yet more security work in 9.1, including FIPS compliance for mainstream HTCSS products, continue to improve the documentation, improve some rough edges in our token work that we did in 9.0. For instance, allowing tokens to work well with the remote administrative tools on a local cluster like the Condor auth and Condor reconfig and Condor drain. We are going to implement a plan to replace GSI and the grid community toolkit functionality. I put a link on this slide to our plans and our timeline. And one of the first steps in that timeline, which is to allow Condor G to submit jobs to an Arc CE using their REST interface, that has already happened. So if you have questions about our security work, I encourage you to listen to Brian Bockelman's talk this afternoon, and also join us in today's town hall discussion. And that's all I have. We're in the modern age now. We have a Twitter feed, so I encourage people to join our Twitter feed. And if Mark says I have time for any questions, I'll take a question.